Hello everyone. Welcome to this first info session on the Alaska Fellows Program. It's good to see so many folks in here. And if you're interested, it'd be great if you could add to your name where you're from or put in the chat, because I'm always excited to see where everyone is from and just kind of give a chance for everyone to introduce themselves. But the way it's going to work is I have a few slides about the Alaska Fellows Program, and then you guys have kind of a easy access to me to ask questions about the program and kind of get the inside scoop on the program and how to apply and kind of all of that. But first, I kind of wanted to make sure that everyone's operating with the same information. So I have a few slides I'm going to go through just so you can understand. And just to double check, can folks see my screen? Do you see the slides? Sweet. Awesome. I'm always curious. When you have two screens, it always seems like things can go awry. So anyway, the Alaska Fellows Program, we're obviously based in Alaska, and this picture right here is the current cohort during the opening convening that occurred in Fairbanks, Alaska. So this is kind of what Fairbanks looks like at the end of September, just to kind of give you an idea. They look a little colder than they probably are. It wasn't that cold, but they were all bundled up. So just kind of an idea. And then a little background on the program in case you all don't know very much about the Fellows Program. It started in 2014 as an all-volunteer run, pretty loose program of fellows all coming from Yale University. They were friends of the founder, Jonathan Kreiss-Tompkins, who he started bringing fellows to Sitka to work at the amazing organizations that are in Sitka, and it kind of just grew from there. And the program over the years has expanded to include fellow positions in Sitka, in Juneau, in Anchorage, and in Fairbanks. So we're pretty much statewide at this point. And then this year we have 31 fellows total in the program. And it's the kind of overall mission of the Alaska Fellows Program. It's kind of, the intention is to both give Alaskans, young Alaskans, a pathway back into the state in order to engage with all the amazing work that's being done, and then also bring other young people into the state to really engage with all the amazing nonprofit and public sector organizations we have within the state. So a little bit of basics. The program's intended for early career professionals. So fellows are generally just done with their undergrad to about 5-6 years out of their undergrad education. We have a few fellows every year that have their masters, but generally everyone's in that early career stage. And so there's kind of two main pillars of the program. There's the professional development component, where you're at a host organization, you're paired with a professional mentor there, and you're really growing and learning in a professional environment. And then at the same time, you live together with other fellows, communally and program housing. And so the other fellows, they come from vastly different backgrounds and are working at different organizations. So there's a lot of cross-learning and cross-connections that happen there. And as I mentioned, 4 communities: Anchorage, Juneau, Sitka, and Fairbanks. And then the program runs September through May in all of our host locations. So this is to give you an idea of kind of where they're spread out across the state, and I'll go into each location in a little more detail. But to give you some scale, so Alaska, if you laid it over top of the lower 48, would reach from coast to coast. So the state is huge. Between Fairbanks and Anchorage right here, these two communities, it's about 6.5-7 hour drive, 300 and some miles. It actually takes me about 6 hours through 2 or 3 different airports to get to Sitka. So it's pretty huge. Sitka is closer to Seattle than it is to Fairbanks. So if that gives you any idea of the scope of how big Alaska is. And as I go through, we'll go from north to south. So I'll start with Fairbanks. This is where I'm based at, and it's generally, I think of Fairbanks as, if people picture Alaska, this is kind of what you picture, you know, cold in the winter, hot in the summer, dark for most of the winter, you know, light all summer long, snow on the ground all winter long, 40 below. We're headed where I think we're like 33 below right now. So Fairbanks is super cold. The community itself has about 70,000 people, so it's kind of a moderate town size. It does have the main research university of Alaska, so it has some amenities that you normally wouldn't find in a community this size. You know, we have a pretty professional ballet, we have a symphony orchestra, we have a pretty vibrant art community and different things like that that you wouldn't normally expect of a town of 70,000 people. And it is on the road system, so you can drive from the lower 48 states to Fairbanks, which, as we go through some of the other communities, you'll understand why that's why that's something to note. The program housing, so there's 8 fellow positions in Fairbanks, and they live in 2 program housing, or 2 houses. They're kind of these kitty corner ones right here, if you can see my mouse. They're part of the Sustainable Village that was built by the Cold Climate Housing Research Center, and so they're experimental housing built on permafrost to kind of see how you can build sustainable housing systems on not great infrastructure or not great ground and things like that. So there's 4 bedrooms in each house, and they're right next to campus. And Fairbanks has 2 program cars that fellows are able to share. If you don't have a car, you don't bring a car up here with you, there's 2 cars to share. Fairbanks is a driving community, so it is pretty challenging to get around if you don't have a car. And so we'll move a little bit further south to Anchorage. Anchorage is our city location. It's probably 350,000 people in the Anchorage area. Over half the state actually lives within kind of the Anchorage census area. So think city. It has all the city amenities that you could ever imagine. Big international airport, all the nightlife, all the city things. It's more temperate than Fairbanks, so it's more coastal. It's on the ocean. They get really big snowstorms. On Monday, I think they got 17 inches of snow in about 12 hours. So it definitely has it has those big storms like that are part of Anchorage, but they don't get nearly as cold. If they get below 0, Anchorage thinks it's freezing. And there's 11 positions in Anchorage. And so these are 2 of the houses. I need to update the 3rd house, but so there are 3 houses within Anchorage. For the 11 positions. There's 3 program cars also within Anchorage for getting around, because Anchorage is very, very much a car city as well. And it is also accessible via road from the lower 48, so you can drive to Anchorage. For both Fairbanks and Anchorage, you do have to cross through Canada in order to get here, but you can drive the whole way. Juneau, going further south, is our first southeast community. It's the capital of Alaska. It probably has 25,000 year-round residents. And I note that because Juneau's population has these big ups and down swings. In the summer, it's a huge cruise ship destination. So they'll have millions of visitors that are going through on cruise ships and all the infrastructure and tourism operators and things that go with that. And then it quiets down in the fall. And then in January, because it's the state capital, legislative session starts. So you have the whole influx of staffers and the whole vibe of the community changes. The energy level just goes higher and higher as session keeps going, it's kind of fun energy, but it does get a little frantic and frenetic. But yeah, it's the community itself is tucked between the ocean and mountain ranges. So it's very it's much more temperate, it's a temperate rainforest functionally. So there's a lot of snow, a lot of rain, but they do a lot of this like snow, rain, up and down. If it's below 20 degrees, Juneau thinks it's really, really cold there. But to note, it is not on the road system. So the only way in and out of Juneau is by boat or by plane. You can get cars there by taking a ferry, putting it on a ferry and getting it there, but you cannot drive straight to Juneau. And this is kind of a picture of the downtown. It's got a very cute historic downtown. Fellows live in 2 program houses that are tucked in right downtown. There's 3 bedrooms in each, so there's 6 fellow positions in Juneau. And at this point, there are no program cars in Juneau. Everything's kind of within walking distance right downtown, and all the fellow positions are downtown. And then further south, and just about a 25-30 minute plane ride from Juneau, is Sitka. Sitka is by far our smallest community. It's maybe 8,000 people. So think super small town America. Everything's within walking distance. It's definitely the type of place where when you're the new person there, you'll walk down the street and everyone knows you're the new person. So people know who's new in town and who's been here a long time. And it's again, it's kind of like Juneau, where it's a temperate rainforest. It's even a little bit warmer than Juneau, so they do a lot more of a little bit of snow, but a lot of rain. So the winter can be very wet, but it's generally not super snowy. That being said, there's big mountains right there, so if you're into skiing or anything like that, all of that is accessible again from Sitka. And Sitka is the only site that all the fellows live in one house. So we have one house that has 7 bedrooms. It's a family house, so all the bedrooms are kind of different and quirky, and there's no program cars in Sitka because everything's within walking distance. But yeah, everyone ends up being a little bit more in each other's business in Sitka just because you're all in one house. And there's some program bikes and things like that for getting around, but Sitka is pretty much entirely walkable. Oh, and I should mention, Sitka is also only accessible by plane or by boat. So again, you can get your car there if you have one by ferry, but you can't drive straight to Sitka. So a little bit of detail about program support. So as part of the program, you're paired with your host organizations and you're expected to work there, but there's also opening and closing all sites retreats where I bring all 4 sites together. I bring them all together in the fall in Fairbanks, and then in the spring I bring everybody back together in Juneau. And it's a good chance to get to know each other and also to renew all cross-site connections and to really build that bigger fellow community. There's site-specific opening and closing retreats where it's just your community cohort that you go out on a cabin trip in the fall when you first get there, and then another one in the spring. And so the fall one is a good chance to have all of those community conversations, like how are we sharing chores and getting to know each other, and how are you going to just handle all the things of living together with others. And then the spring one is just a fun chance to kind of celebrate completing the program. There's site coordinators in each community. These are generally alumni, so they've been through the program and have chosen to stay in their communities. They're well connected, so they're there to, if you want to join a basketball team, or you want to be a volunteer firefighter, or do a radio program, or whatever you like, they're there to help you make those connections and to figure out how to do it. They're also there as kind of your first friend in town and someone that you can call for help. Like if you get a flat tire on your car and you don't know anyone in Anchorage, it can be a little scary. And so it's nice to have the site coordinators there to kind of be that helpline for when you need some help. There's also a pretty strong alumni network in all of our communities that we really help fellows tap into and get connections and make those deeper connections into the community. And then there's always ad hoc program events that pop up during the course of the year, depending on what's going on in different communities that we help you connect with. This is in there because I want people to really, really think intentionally about this, because the program is 2 pillars, the work positions and the mentorship, professional mentorship, but it's also living together with others that come from different backgrounds, have different lived experiences, have different communication styles, and all of that. So really, I want people that are coming into the program to be really intentional about being open and willing to connect with your housemates and the people you're living with, and to really understand that people have so many different lived experiences. So you're going to have to really be intentional in your communication and how you interact with people. And there's lots of different ways. Community dinners are a really common way that fellows keep those connections going, Sunday dinners. Sometimes they do one-on-one dates. There's all sorts of different ways. And each year the cohorts build their traditions differently. And here are just some examples of the different community connections that fellows have made in the past. We've had fellows be volunteer firefighters. Almost every year we have at least one cohort that gets super excited about hosting radio programs. Fairbanks has a radio show this year, and I think there's a couple radio shows in Sitka. They do like community dinners, like I said, take art classes, go on different camping trips. It's pretty much the world is your oyster. So there's lots of different ways to get connected. Just a little bit of stats that I throw in here, like fellows are from all over the place. I think at this point we've had fellows from about every single state, 7 different countries, and about half of them end up staying in state afterwards. So I want folks to think really intentionally about this as well. So because this is a bit of a service position and you're foregoing that get out of college, get a job that pays you super well and start getting your retirement and all that stuff, you're kind of trading some of that monetary benefit for lived experiences. So I want fellows to come into the program being really, really intentional about that. So your housing and your utilities and all of that are covered as part of the program, which depending on the community is about $800 to $1,000 in value every month. And then you also get a living stipend of $1,150 every month to cover food. If you're in a car community, gas and things like that. There's a $500 stipend that you're given at the beginning for helping to relocate to the state. And then if you complete the entire program, you get a $500 stipend at the end for completing. You're guaranteed at least 10 days off from your host positions during the course of the program. I say at least because there's some of the positions that because of the host schedule, you end up with more than that. So for instance, Mount Edgecombe High School in Sitka, the whole school takes 3 weeks off for Christmas break. So obviously there's no students, there's nothing for the fellows to do. So they have a longer Christmas break than some of the other positions. With that, you're agreeing to work up to 40 hours a week with your hosts. Some work a little less, but generally it's about 40 hours a week. You're committing to attending all of the retreats and convenings, and then being really intentional and contributing to your community. The application process, which I'm just getting online. I'm a little behind because hosts are slow getting me their position descriptions. But if you guys are watching the website, things are popping on all the time right now. But by next week, I should have all of the position descriptions up so you can look through what all the different positions are, what the roles will entail. And then the application process is there's a Google form and it has a suite of questions around communal living that I review to make sure that you've actually thought about that. And to make sure that it's largely a just prompting you to really be intentional and think about it. And then each host position description, the hosts are able to ask for different materials they want. Generally, they want resumes, cover letters, and 2 or 3 references. Some of them will ask for writing examples if it's a really writing intensive position, or if it's a communication position, they might want a PowerPoint presentation or something like that. So read the position descriptions closely to see if they ask for something extra. And then within that form, you'll be able to upload all of these documents that they ask. My biggest piece of advice for everybody applying is that for the host positions that you're interested in, write a specific cover letter for that host. When fellows have written just generic, I want to be part of AFP cover letters, those don't review nearly as well as if you write a specific cover letter for the host you're interested in. And you can submit more than one cover letter and I'll make sure they get to the right hosts. But they do want to know that you've looked at who they are and looked at the position and have actually thought about it. So I take all of those, the resumes, cover letters, and references, and I send them to the host that you're interested in. The hosts review them. They decide who they're going to interview. The host conducted the interview and then make the final selection. And all of that usually it takes the hosts anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks, depending on which host it is. Some of them are super speedy about it, and some of them drag their feet. But the intention is that you all know by the end of May where you're going next. So by the time you're graduating, if that's right where you're at right now, you all have a good idea of where you're going next. I did want to back up to here. One other thing that I need to get on the slide that I want to mention is we are not able to provide healthcare at this point. And I really want fellows applicants to think about that ahead of time. In the past, we've recommended that applicants and fellows get on state Medicare, Medicaid, and up until COVID, it was a pretty good system. And post-COVID, the state is a mess in their reviewing of Medicare, Medicaid applications, and it's a 4 to 6 month backlog right now. So I really, really recommend if you are on other healthcare options, try to remain on that, because otherwise you'll be stuck in this limbo trying to get switched to the state system. And I'm hoping that someday they will figure it out, but that is state government at work right now, and I don't really have a good option for fellows. And that's kind of my big spiel. And so you guys can all unmute and ask questions at this point. So yeah, and if you want to raise your hands or just speak up, or whatever system works. So.
Based on the experience of previous fellows, do you think it's more important to consider your host placement or the city that you are applying to in terms of like fit and what fellows find to be the best?
Yeah, I would say your host probably ends up having more bearing on your experience than your specific community. Largely, the communities are all the same as what you've already experienced, and entirely different. It's like moving to any new community where there's some parts that are just like home, and you're like, oh, I thought this would be different, and then there's other parts where it's completely out of your world and you have no idea. And so really, from that end, being open to wherever you go and willing to engage with what's there and the community is much more important than what the specific community is. And I think having a host that's a good fit for your interests and where you want to go is probably more key than being super jazzed about going to a tiny community or a big city or things like that. That being said, if you are absolutely terrified of like 40 below and cold, Fairbanks might not be for you. Or other thing to consider, if you don't drive, Fairbanks and Anchorage are more challenging communities to get around. So we do have fellows every year in both communities that don't have their driver's license, that don't drive, but you have to work around it. There's the public transportation system in Alaska is abysmal. So Juneau and Sitka are probably easier communities to feel fully integrated in if you don't drive.
Thank you.
Yeah. Andrew?
Yeah, thanks, Tina. Just out of curiosity, do you think that there's, across all fellows and all sites, good motivations or bad motivations that you've seen people come into the program with? Likewise, do you see is there a type of person or personality that particularly does well when they're put in Alaska? And is there a type of personality or person that you'd say maybe like, if this is who you are or your reason for doing this, maybe think twice kind of thing?
Yeah, I don't think there's a specific personality that thrives or doesn't thrive in the program. I think it's more of an outlook. So if you come in really open to new experiences and saying yes, and to engaging with who you're living with and being open to the people you're living with having different viewpoints and being really willing to have those discussions and to build those connections, you do a lot better. If you come in very like set in your ways and this is how the world's going to be and this is how my like home life is going to be and all like super rigid on that, it does end up being more challenging. I would say the other thing the program kind of pulls in is because all of our partner organizations are other nonprofit or public sector organizations. Fellows generally come in with a little bit of a make the world a better place mindset, I would say. So you're not going to fall into a position where you're going to end up being, a high-powered investment banker in New York City after this. It's generally not the experience you're going to get. So just kind of thinking about what kind of experience you're after and what connections you're interested in making. Does that help?
Awesome. Thank you.
Alex?
Hey, so you mentioned before that about like 50% of fellows engage in some kind of post-fellowship opportunity. And I'm just wondering sort of what are the details of that? fellows or alumni stay within the same city, or do they usually like move around to a different city within Alaska?
Yeah, great question. So I would say it's very, very common for so the number like 50% stays post fellowship. I would say that it's probably higher than 50% for the summer. So it's very common for fellows to want and figure out a way to stay for the summer post fellowship. Partly you come right at the end of summer and you get just a little bit of a taste, and then the fellowship finishes just as summer's getting going. So that's really common. I would say the fellows that stay, the 46 to 50% that do stay, we have a few every year that end up staying with their host organization. It was a really good fit and they're able to roll into a full-time position with their host. The others generally end up staying because of some connection that they've made during their fellowship. We work really hard in the springtime to learn what the fellows are interested in post-fellowship, and to connect them in with alumni that might be able to help them make their next steps, or with different engaged community members and things like that, and help the fellows make their connections to stay in the state. A lot of fellows end up in Anchorage. Largely, there's more opportunities in Anchorage, just being bigger. But I would say it's a little bit, each community has a different feel. Like there's definitely fellows that fall in love with Juneau and like they work super hard to never leave Juneau and are, so it's a little bit up to what kind of gets the hooks into you, I would say, where you end up staying. Yeah, I don't know if that really answers it. It's a little rambling, but
It did, thank you.
yeah. I think Haley was next.
Thanks. Hi, Tina, and hi, everyone. I have two quick questions. The first was, I was wondering about a specific host organization, Spruce Root.
Mhm.
Are they hosting a fellow this year?
They'll be in Sitka.
Oh, awesome. Okay, that's great. And then the second was in the locations that don't have cars. What's been the experience of fellows in terms of like if they need to drive or go do like they want to do an outdoor adventure or go skiing? I'm assuming that's not accessible by foot. What has been like, is that the case, and what's been the experience?
Yeah, great question. So that's a little bit of where the site coordinators come in the different communities. In Sitka especially, there's a pretty strong alumni network. And there's a lot of people that borrow and use other people's vehicles, I would say, in Sitka. And we do help fellows, like if there's specific events they're trying to get to and things like that, find transportation. Juneau's a little bit of the same thing, where it's grown up a little bit organic, where fellows get connections and how they get there. And I would say too, like I'm working on trying to get vehicles in all the communities, at least one. We'll see if it always takes money, which is always the the struggle. But I would say if there's things that you want to do and you're in one of the walking communities, ask your site coordinator, because there's always resources that can be tapped into to get you where you want to go.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah. I think Michael is next.
Awesome, thanks, Tina. My question was about the list of hosts, and it's a great selection. However, I have a specific nonprofit that I was hoping to work with in Alaska, and I know they are super interested in becoming a host with Alaska Fellows Program. I was wondering, what's the process like to create that connection?
So I got to ask, who is it? Who's your?
Great question. Yeah, it's the Fairbanks Ski Coalition.
Of the ski. Oh, okay. I would get, so that's also fairly organic. Yeah, if you want to send me contact, I am still looking for one more Fairbanks host. So actually that's very fortuitous, because I had a couple that ended up hiring their fellows and taking the year off. So yeah, I would say it's a little bit word of mouth at this point, where I'm connected and then there's some discussion back and forth and we figure out whether it works or doesn't work. So send me information.
I'll be in touch. Thanks.
Yeah. Other questions? Oh, Zach, go ahead.
Yes, hello. I just had just two sort of smaller questions, sort of just about the application process.
Mhm.
I guess like one is like within the application process, are we allowed to apply to as many positions as we want, or is it kind of an allocation of just like one position?
Yeah, great question. So this year I am limiting it to 4. So you can pick 4 different hosts that you're interested in. And do like that. That's really the max, because sometimes it ends up being I don't want people to apply to too many, because then we get in this weird waiting game of one host is super fast on interviewing somebody and another one's slow. And then the fellow really wants to hear back from this other one before they make the decision on the first one that offered, and things like that. And it gets to be, it's unfair to the fellows that are, like that are also applying, and the hosts and things like that. And it just gets super confusing on the fellows end trying to make a decision on the host end. So yeah, so 4 is pretty much the max. I generally recommend people like focus on your 2 favorites really, and put some effort into the cover letter. There's contact information for all the hosts in the position descriptions, and so I recommend emailing the host directly to find out more information about the positions. There's alumni that have been in most of these different fellow positions. So if you want to learn more, if you want to be connected with an alumni, shoot me an email and I can connect you, so you can find out from somebody that's not running the program, but has actually gone through the program, what it's like to be at that host and what it's like to be a fellow, because I don't always have the best view on what it's like on the day-to-day to be a fellow.
Yeah, and then it's like the last thing I had, thank you, and just like the last thing I had relating to the positions. Also, like when would the I guess like is it known like which date approximately like applications would open up if they're not open like already?
Yes, next week. They will be
Yes.
open next week, by the end of next week. That is my drop dead date for my hosts that are being really slow right now. So they'll be open next week, and then they'll stay open until the first week in March or so. So
Awesome.
You
Thank you so
have a lot
much.
yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions? David, go for it. Oh, you're muted though.
Sorry,
There
I
you
was muted. Hey Tina, thanks for the info. I had a question about, the positions you said they'd be up by end of next week at the latest. But are all the orgs listed on there, the orgs that will be participating? Are there maybe a few that might be populated on there in the coming days?
Yep, there's a few that are still waiting to get back to me, confirming. Partly they're confirming that they have the funding to do it. But yes, there'll be a few more that'll pop on. If you're interested, if there's anybody that you were hoping to see on there that you're not seeing, you can shoot me an email and I can tell you whether they're kind of waiting in the wings to tell me the official yes or no. But generally that's the hosts that are on there are the ones that'll be around this next year.
And
Awesome.
just to that point, Tina, on the positions website, some have open next to them and even a description, but then there's kind of a list at the bottom of like Alaska Municipal League, Launch Alaska, like these ones that don't have anything. Are those ones that will have a position, they just have a position yet?
There's a few that are past hosts that won't be popping back up, but some of those will be popping back up as soon as they make up their mind. But the ones that say open they've already committed to this year. And their position descriptions just need to be added officially. So
Got it. And then like you said, by the end of next week, for sure, we'll know what that universe of options is.
Yep. By end of next week, they will have, committed themselves to doing it. So
Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? No questions about what it's like to be in Alaska all winter? I can tell you one thing as you're thinking about it. The thing that people always worry about coming to Alaska is about how cold it is. And the thing that surprises people that gets to them is the light. So the cold people just roll with. It's never as bad as what people are anticipating it being. But the dark is always more impactful than people anticipate, because you will definitely be getting less sunlight than you've probably ever seen in your life, unless you're from Alaska. So that's the thing that surprises people. So
I was reading somewhere. Oh, sorry, Haley. I I was reading somewhere on the website about adjusting the work day around like getting enough light.
Mhm.
How does that play out?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say many of our hosts, not all of them, are flexible about what your workday is. So Fairbanks, it's really common for fellows to take what amounts to an extra long lunch because the sun is up in January from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And so if you want to get out and actually see sunlight, that's your window. So it's really common for folks to work around where like they work earlier in the morning, take a long lunch, and then work further into the evening because if it's been dark since 3, working till 5, working till 6 becomes kind of a moot point. So I would say that's more of the flexibility that people get around it. And while we're talking about flexibility, Elizabeth asked about remote opportunities. So most of the positions are either in person or some kind of hybrid of a few days in the office. But there are a few, and it should be noted in the position description, where they're entirely remote, largely because the host organization's team is entirely remote. With that being said, we do really work with the mentors to make sure that you get in-person time. Like, we don't want you just to hide in your bedroom the entire time and stare at a screen and never actually interact with a real person. So all of them, even the fully remote ones, there is in-person interaction that goes on, but some of them, there's a few that are entirely remote. And
May
Haley?
I ask, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I have a quick question about, I suppose the fellows that are coming in as settlers or visitors, what kind of opportunities do they have to work with, learn from, and access resources surrounding the local Indigenous communities and governance systems, and like what these what our places visitors may be to the land in respect to those who have been carers to it previous to us. Does that make sense?
Yes, no, that's a
Okay, thank
fantastic
you.
question. And we put a fair amount of effort into helping fellows learn as much about the Indigenous context before they come. Once you're selected, there is a whole suite of kind of summer reading for everyone to do, that there's a lot of information around on all the Indigenous communities, the Indigenous context about how Alaska is a settler state, but just understanding, because it's a very, very different system than when you'll experience in the lower 48. And then I would say most of the host positions, if not all, like, there's definitely different levels of how upfront and center the Indigenous context is within the host position. Some of them, it's super like that is what you're doing. If you're working at Sealaska Heritage, or you're working at Sealaska or Mount Edgecombe High School, like that is, you're going to be deep in Indigenous issues and Indigenous context in the state. If you're working at the Alaska Center for Energy and Power, you'll be working with a lot of different Indigenous communities, but it's not as centric to what the work is. But I would say almost all of our host positions, if not all of them, have a lot of Indigenous values and stuff centered within the work and within the host organization. So it's you'll be deep in it no matter where you end up.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Max?
Good, everyone. Thanks for the presentation, Tina. I was wondering, going back to the daylight question, if there are any Alaska-specific activities that people do in the nighttime to kind of boost spirits, or if it's something like within the different hosts or like the different communities of fellows that are traditions to do, to keep moods up at night.
Yeah, I mean, I would say both Fairbanks and Anchorage have gotten heavily into cross-country skiing this year. Some years they're more engaged than others. Both communities have oodles and oodles and oodles of ski trails. I would say the biggest thing to really making it through the winter and staying engaged is to find your thing that keeps you moving. Like, exercise, if that's really what you're into. We have a fellow that's doing roller derby this year. So like finding your thing, whether it's going to the gym and playing basketball or whatever, finding something that gets you moving. But also finding kind of your comfort spot. So like accepting that the winter is inherently a little bit slower, and giving yourself grace that if you're normally someone that's like, I'm up at 5:30 a.m. and I go to the gym and I da 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 and I have my whole day planned out, and then I'm busy, and all of a sudden you get to November here and you're feeling like a slug. That's normal. It's not something that's like something's wrong with you. And to embrace it a little bit and give yourself a little bit of grace for like, oh, well, maybe my like 100 miles an hour life that I'm used to needs to like adjust for the fact that everything's a little bit slower in the winter. But at the same time, don't just like hibernate and hide in your bedroom and binge Netflix for 3 months. So, but kind of finding that sweet spot of what works for you and where you're engaged in, and doing things with people. I think that's the other thing that fellows need to be intentional about, is that getting out and seeing people and doing things with people, because it can be really easy to just hide and not go out, not see anybody, not try that new thing. Like if one of your cohort is going ice skating and you've never skated, saying yes to new things, I think really helps people get through the winter. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, those are really great suggestions. Appreciate it.
I was wondering how much interaction there is between like the people in the different cities. So like how much are people in Fairbanks interacting with those in Sitka other than those opening and closing retreats? Like are people planning trips, or is it kind of opening and closing retreat and that's it?
Yeah, I would say it's a little bit variable. So Fairbanks and Anchorage, it's a little bit easier for a lot of interaction to happen because you can drive between the two. So they're able, like fellows are able to road trip back and forth if they want. That being said, like I think I have 4 Anchorage fellows that are going to Juneau in the next month for different things. One of the things that we try to really promote, and that we actually set aside money for, is helping fellows travel to different professional development opportunities. So I'm flying a Juneau fellow into Anchorage for a conference, and she's staying with the Anchorage fellows, and I'm flying 2 more to Juneau for another conference, and they're staying with the Juneau fellows. So there's a lot of like that back and forth cross-pollination. It's not set in stone at the beginning of the year, like what'll happen. It's kind of as things pop up, we take advantage of it. And then there's also fellows that coordinate stuff on their own. We had a Sitka fellow that decided she was going to Juneau and hanging out with the Juneau fellows for Thanksgiving and things like that. So it's some of it's pretty organic and some of it's AFP supported. So it's a little bit different for each year. That makes sense.
Great. Yeah, no, that does. Thank you so much.
And Haven, you should send me an email about the roller derby fellow you want to connect with. Otherwise, I'll completely forget. So, and am I saying your name right?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Any other questions?
I think there was one in the chat.
Did I miss it? I was wondering what proportion of fellows are coming directly out of college versus a bit out of college. Good question. Probably 65-70% are straight out of college, and then the remaining 35% or so are somewhere within that like first 5-year early career stage. I think the oldest fellow we have this year is 29, and she has her master's. So there's a little bit of an age range, but generally it's folks that are just starting out in their professional lives.
For participants who are not from Alaska, do they typically go to their home state for around the holidays in December?
Most of them do. it's dark here, so usually people are ready for for a chance to get out and head home and see, you know, see some sunlight, see family and things like that. We do have some fellows that have had family come up and visit them for Christmas. So because Alaska is remote from everywhere else, every community has a big airport. So it's very different than the lower 48, where you might have to drive a couple hours to get to an airport that can take you somewhere. You know, like Anchorage has one of the busiest international airports in the world as far as cargo. You know, there's tons of flights out all the time. Fairbanks has an international airport. Juneau, I'm not sure if, I think Juneau is actually international too, because they have flights to Canada. So all of them have airports. They might be size-wise relatively tiny in the sense that they have just one or two gates, like in Sitka, but big planes fly in and out all the time. So it's relatively easy to get out. It's easier to get from Sitka to Seattle than it is to get Sitka to Fairbanks, if that makes any sense. So it's generally pretty easy to get out. That being said, you know, Christmas travel is always a pain, as you guys probably all know. That's when there's big snowstorms in Chicago and other crazy things like that. So. And you guys should all have my email. Everyone have my email? I'll put it in the chat. But if you have any other questions, just drop me an email. I'm happy to hop on the phone or hop on Zoom with anyone and answer any questions. Do we have any of you that are from Alaska? Or are you all from out of state? I think, looking back in the chat, I think everyone is from out of state.
I'm Alaskan.
Oh, nice.
I'm in the Wood Center right now.
Fairbanks. Okay, I see in your chat. Nice. I don't have to talk to you about how cold Fairbanks is then. Great. Well, if there's no other questions, yeah, I can let you all guys have, 12 minutes of your day back. It's great to meet everyone. And yeah, I look forward to seeing all your applications.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tina.
Thanks again. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Gina.